And there you have it, Canada's 30th cabinet now sworn in by the Governor-General. Mark Carney's second Executive Council now named and sworn in. Now, we should point out that we will hear a little bit later this afternoon from the Prime Minister as he addresses members of the media regarding his new cabinet. We assume that he will actually be flanked by his new ministers. But ahead of that, let's now go back to Rideau Hall, or outside of Rideau Hall, as we leave the hall where the actual swearing-in took place. Let's go to Andrew Thompson in front of the complex. Andrew, hello to you. So listen, a lot to talk about here, including what the next steps are as this day kind of goes on. But let's first and foremost note the fact that when you look at this cabinet, we were promised 50% new faces. That looks like what we got here. And amongst those names not appearing are people that were named to the first cabinet of Mark Carney just 2 months ago.
That's right, Michael. So 10 ministers are no longer in cabinet. Some of the key portfolios, let's start with Bill Blair, the defense minister. He's no longer in cabinet. Jonathan Wilkinson, you were talking about him before the ceremony started. He's out as Minister of Energy and Natural Resources as well. Nate Erskine-Smith, no longer housing minister. That job now going to the former Vancouver mayor, Gregor Robertson. As well, we have Terry Duguid from Winnipeg. He is no longer the environment minister. Some of the other names no longer in cabinet who were in that initial Mark Carney cabinet include Rachel Bendayan, the immigration minister, Cody Blois, the agriculture minister, Ariel Kayabega, who had been appointed government house leader. The other two names on that list no longer in cabinet, Michael, are Ali Assassi and Elizabeth Briere.
Yeah, so as we say, a number of ministers that made it the first time around for Mark Carney's cabinet not appearing this time around, replaced by some new names, people elected in the general election just 2 weeks ago. So listen, we just saw the cabinet, the Prime Minister leave the swearing-in ceremony. Walk us through what else happens throughout this day, Andrew.
Okay, well, we expect there's going to be the family photo, the traditional photo of the ministry taking place here inside Rideau Hall. There are lots of dignitaries, family members in the building, so we expect there to be a bit of mingling. And then the Prime Minister is expected, as he mentioned, to speak with reporters outside Rideau Hall, but that's not going to be happening for over an hour. We expect that news conference to be happening around 1:40 p.m. We're also told that Cabinet will not be meeting today. Sometimes we do see on these days where there's a swearing-in ceremony, the ministers make their way over to Parliament Hill for that first meeting, but according to the Prime Minister's office, that won't be happening on Parliament Hill. But on Parliament Hill, we will be hearing from the Conservative Party leader at 1 p.m. Eastern. Pierre Poilievre and his deputy whip, Chris Warkentin, are going to be reacting to this new cabinet, Michael.
Okay, and of course we're going to have both Pierre Poilievre, his news conference, as well as the Prime Minister's news conference in the next hour. But Andrew, stand by. You and I may speak again as this day goes on, but for now, thank you for that, CPAC's Andrew Thompson. Well, I also want to bring into the program right now Marcy Sirk. She is the Chief Strategy Officer and Managing Director at Compass Rose. Before that, she also served as Executive Director of Policy and Cabinet Affairs in Justin Trudeau's PMO. Marcy, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Listen, I want to begin with the names that are not present here. Of course, we now have a whole list of new cabinet ministers, first-timers elected to Parliament, but a lot of names not included this time around. Amongst them, stalwarts like Bill Blair, Jonathan Wilkinson, Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor. Talk to us about the choice to omit these veterans of Parliament, given the fact that, Mark Carney himself does not really have that much political experience, and certainly not experience in the House.
Well, what we've got here is half rookies, half veterans. And I think what Mr. Carney has been, what his team has been signaling, what he's been attempting to do is to actually strike that exact balance between providing change, delivering on change. And that was core to his election victory 2 weeks ago. He himself embodies change, but that team around him, they didn't really look all that fresh to most Canadians. And so he's had this delicate dance, Michael, of having to try to find some other way of signaling and demonstrating change He is doing that today with all of these newbies. And then, yes, he has maintained some veterans in key portfolios. And that's, to his advantage and to his credit, frankly. You could have thrown the baby out with the bathwater and started anew. But in this instance, he is going to continue to leverage and harness the know-how that he has built in to some of the individuals who are still on that front bench today. So it's a bit of column A, a bit of column B, trying to find that sweet spot in the middle where Liberals like to find themselves, I should say, right in the middle of that spectrum.
Does he need to worry about offending people, though? Because in addition to the names I mentioned, there, of course, Karina Gould, who ran for leadership herself. There's Mark Miller, who was a very capable minister in the Trudeau government. Does he need to be worried about resentment being built in caucus?
Leadership is tough. And there is no question in my mind that there are going to be there are already disappointed people out there today. About 30 people who are in this cabinet, but 170 elected Liberal members. That means, the majority of those elected members of caucus are not part of this announcement today. So they are on the outside. And that is a very hard pill to swallow, especially for those who were in positions of prominence as recently as yesterday. And for no fault, no real reason per se, are not in cabinet today. So leadership, that sounds so basic and obvious. Leadership is about making tough choices. Mr. Carney and his team, no doubt, have weighed all of these considerations at considerable length over the last number of weeks. Probably this process began even before the election, I would submit. They've been thinking through who is the right fit for right now. Each ministry is really meant to be a reflection of the moment they are sworn in. So who is the right what is the right bench and the right team for this moment? Mr. Carney has made the tough determination that this is the crew that meets this moment for him and for Canada. There are other roles. There are other important roles. Cabinet is not the be-all and end-all. There are critical roles within caucus leadership, House leadership, party leadership. And I would anticipate that some of those individuals who are not at Rideau Hall right now will find themselves in other positions of leadership, because again, the majority of caucus is not in cabinet. That does not mean that there isn't a heavy lift for others in other places.
Mm-hmm. When you say that, immediately in my mind pops in a name like Carlos Letao. Of course, former Quebec finance minister, was considered a successful finance minister in the province, in fact recruited by Mark Carney, and yet Mr. Carney still chooses to stay with François-Philippe Champagne. What's the logic behind that, do you think?
A finance minister and a prime minister have to find some kind of marriage of the minds. They really have to be in a true partnership in order for that relationship to work. Monsieur Champagne and Mr. Carney have worked together. They worked very closely together over the course of Mr. Carney's leadership tenure. Mr. Carney must believe that he and Monsieur Champagne share this vision, that they will be able to both challenge one another on decision making, but ultimately come to the right outcomes. I agree with you, Michael. Mr. Letao, clearly a very qualified candidate. Most observers, myself included, would have anticipated a role for him in the cabinet today. But as I said before, there isn't enough space for everyone in cabinet. There are other roles. Mr. Letao clearly will play some form of leadership role given his experience. We'll see what that is. Not in this spot, not at this moment. Finance is also a very, very tough job to parachute a rookie into. We saw the former government do that with Bill Morneau, and Bill Morneau performed admirably, but it's a steep learning curve. That is not an entry-level position. So perhaps Mr. Letao will find his way into that chair, although he was a provincial minister, not a federal MP previously, and doesn't have that federal experience. Perhaps gaining a little experience and traction in Ottawa will allow for him to grow and flourish in the days ahead. But I would still anticipate him playing some form of advisory role to Mr. Carney, and certainly as a key interface with the Quebec government.
A key interface Quebec government. It does make me wonder as well, because we have here a prime minister who, of course, campaigned on an economic focus for this country, promising to move things faster than Canadians are used to usher in change quicker than we might anticipate. You talk about an advisory role for Mr. Leitao. He's not the only finance minister in the Liberal caucus. We also have Charles Sousa, who is a former Ontario finance minister as well. What kind of roles do you see evolving for them beyond advisory role? What kind of concrete roles can they play for this government to meet the agenda that Mr. Carney has set out for his government?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, in the Liberal caucus, and this will sound like a partisan comment, I don't mean for it to, but the Liberal caucus is blessed with considerable experience and talent on the bench. It has a deeper bench today than it maybe has in other times. And so Mr. Carney will be able to pick and choose from any number of individuals who bring considerable experience and talent to bear. So that is a good thing, ultimately, not only for the Liberal Party, but for the government and for Canadians to see this many talented people stepping forward into public life and public office. With respect to those individuals, again, I don't want to speculate too much. I don't know exactly where they will end up, but I would say there are key roles to play within Parliament. Certainly there will be, Parliament is back on the 26th of May. That feels, it's like tomorrow practically. We are going to have key roles to play and fill on committees, committee chairs, leads on committees, parliamentary secretaries to all of these ministers. Some of them will have economic roles and portfolios naturally attached to them because they will be the voice in Parliament for the ministers of finance or industry as it go forward. So, again, without speculating too widely, I would say simply that there are still many important roles left to fill, and key roles within the Commons matter a lot to getting the government's agenda through, particularly in a minority parliament.
Yeah, I talked about the economic agenda that was Mr. Carney has set forth for his own government, Marcy. I'm wondering how this cabinet, in your viewpoint, what type of signal it sends to the business community about how serious Mr. Carney is about moving his agenda forward and quickly.
I think all of the signals being sent to the business community should be interpreted as positive. Mr. Carney himself, from first instance, has made very clear that he intends to listen to and be closer to corporate Canada than his predecessor. He is attempting to run the government much more like a business. That is part of the streamlining exercise that we have seen today, a smaller, tighter cabinet, leaner and meaner. He is very, very key. He is clued into that the fact that the business community did not feel like they were seen or heard under Mr. Trudeau. I don't know that I agree with that entirely, but that is certainly the sentiment and the view, pervasive view within corporate Canada. And Mr. Carney has signaled that he intends for that to shift and change. He is very clear that the government of Canada will be reliant on corporate Canada as a partner to help drive his core economic priority, which is one nation, one economy. We saw that Minister LeBlanc even styled with that moniker today. There are obviously constitutional issues that get raised when you talk about one nation, one economy in a federation like ours. But I think the sentiment is widely understood that we have to break down interprovincial trade barriers to be stronger as a sovereign nation. And the business community is going to be really, really critical to delivering on any of those pieces for Mr. Carney. So I would hope corporate Canada sees today as a positive. I think some of the ministers, particularly Tim Hodgson going in at natural resources, should be well received, certainly by those in the resource sectors. We know we need to get our commodities to market. We are going to have a minister who understands that, who has played a role in that from the other side of the table, so to speak. Now he'll be at the big table in the cabinet room, bringing those interests forward on behalf of stakeholders. I think this is all net positive.
Marcy, I always appreciate the insight. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, we'll chat soon. That's Marcy Sturks. Well, let's bring back the panel to talk about what we just witnessed at Rideau Hall. I'll begin with general impressions here, in particular the names that have been chosen to be part of this cabinet. Rob, what stands out for you?
Well, if you look at his priorities, as far as I was concerned, the priorities were national unity and the relationship with the United States and national prosperity. national unity, who is going to be the interlocutor with Alberta on getting its resources to market it? And we see that it's Tim Hodgson. Important, former head of Hydro One. He knows the energy sector. He knows Mr. Carney very well. They both worked at Goldman Sachs, but Mr. Carney recruited him as an advisor at the Bank of Canada. So there's obviously a very close relationship between the two of them. So I thought that was noteworthy. In terms of the front bench to deal with the United States, there's been a swap between Anita Anand and Melanie Joly. So Anita Anand goes into foreign affairs. Melanie Joly goes to industry. She wants an industrial portfolio. She wanted to get some sort of economic pedigree going. She has leadership ambitions. She put those aside for Mr. Carney, but I don't think, given her age, that those ambitions have subsided entirely. In terms of the size of this cabinet, I noted that Mr. Trudeau's first cabinet was 31 people. Mr. Harper's was 26 people. There tends to be cabinet inflation over time. So if this is the smallest that Mr. Carney's cabinet is going to get, I don't think we can call it lean and focused, which is what the sobriquets were given to his first cabinet when it was, what was it, 24, 25 people?
Yeah, 26, I think.
That's right. So this is not lean and focused. I thought he might use the secretaries of state to be, in effect, managing directors. He comes from the business world. Managing directors run operations on a minute-by-minute basis, while cabinet ministers might have acted as a CEO. I don't see that, given the kinds of roles that the secretaries of state have. So not exactly lean and focused.
Yeah, not lean and focused. We'll pick up on a couple of the other points. Catherine, pour vous?
On avait dit que ça allait être un travail
We were told
d'équilibriste.
that it would be a balancing act for Mark Carney. I think we can see that when you look at each region. They're all represented. Alberta less, but there were fewer candidates there. Nine ministers from Quebec, 14 from Ontario. Labrador, NWT. So most of the regions seem to be represented. 5 from BC. Parity is attained, 14 men, 14 women, 15 if you count Mark Carney, but it's 50-50. Several new faces, some well-known faces. As we were saying earlier, I think he's been successful in managing a balance to try not to annoy too many people, to please others. Of course, there are some people sitting at home who are a bit disappointed. We know the names. You've mentioned several of them. Andrew talked about Elizabeth Bruyere from Sherbrooke. She's not a big name, she's not a pillar, a heavy hitter, but she's loyal, she's been there for some time. I might have thought that she might be appointed as a minister or a secretary of state. She hasn't been, so that's strange perhaps, but we do see that it has been a balancing act. Laurie.
Well, this is a big group of people. I don't see this as like pared down at all. This is a big group of people, for better or for worse, we will see. I thought it was very interesting, just to pick up on some comments that Rob had made around Anand is now going to be part of that team who's going to be going down to the White House and having these visits and dealing with the whole Trump situation. And so when we saw Carney's visit to the Oval Office last week, I think it was last week. Time is moving very strangely now. And Melanie Joly was there. Like there is now going to be a change to that team, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of effect that has. But heck of a day for Anita Anand. You could see how happy she was. No one is happier than Champagne, I think. But you can see some of these people are just honestly seem very happy to be there. I think you can see, pretty clearly a team that's going to be focused on the Trump trade Canada-U.S. relationship issue, which Dominic LeBlanc is clearly going to be the key champion of. And then you can also see, I think, a team that would naturally crop up around national unity and internal trade and working on issues that will keep the country together throughout all of this. And then some of the appointments around things that the government has to do that are really important, that aren't necessarily totally front and center on one of those overlying issues. And so for Nova Scotia, like to have the Attorney General and Minister of Justice and also Minister for Immigration key files that the government is going to be working on that, again, don't necessarily plug into those national unity or Canada-US themes, but are really important. So, yeah, I mean, again, a lot of people. We'll have to sit down and go through the list and try to come up with little groupings of them to remember who they all are, because it's a big list.
It is a big list, Geneviève.
Je vais continuer sur ce que Laurie a
I'll
dit.
pick up on what Laurie's just said.
Si on cherche quelque chose, on va le trouver.
If you're looking for something, you'll find it. There are people who've been there for a long time, new faces. Those who've done a good job have been rewarded. Anita Anand, for example, and Gary Anand. That's a big promotion for him from justice to public safety. He's going to be in the White House.
Because I was actually at the White House last week, and I was in the Oval Office when they were meeting, and there was Dominic LeBlanc, David McGuinty, you had François-Philippe Champagne and Melanie Joly, and, thinking about today, it would be Anita Anand instead of Jolie there, and it would be Ananda Sangari over McGuinty. So you're right; they will be the ones in the White House negotiating.
Oui, mais M. McGuinty s'en va à la défense.
But Mr. McGuinty is going to defense, so that's a promotion. Defense will be very, very important for Canada in the future. So there are new faces. Ms. De Brusen from the Ontario Environment. We don't know her very well. She speaks French pretty well. She's going to be the new spokesperson for the environment for the government. That's interesting. If there's one disappointment that I have is that there's no one apart from Dominique Leblanc, who's a francophone from outside Quebec. Stephen Guilbeault is at official languages, so I think that official language communities outside Quebec will be disappointed. Council Treasury Board is a new person as well, and they're responsible for implementing the Official Languages Act, especially New Brunswick, who is very, very disappointed to see official languages disappear. Ginette Petitpas-Taylor's no longer there.
Mark Carney, mais qui a pas gardé
Mark Carney's previous appointment is no longer there. So for official languages, I have some questions. I don't think it's going to be a priority for this government.
See the fallout of all of these choices, right? Because we're just getting the first blushes of it. And I will say a couple of things struck me, and among them was Marjorie Michel, because here is now the Minister of Health, a first-time parliamentarian, a huge portfolio. So that's something that I'll be watching very closely. Another thing that struck me, if you are creating a cabinet to signal change, in the front row was Leblanc, Joly, François-Philippe Champagne, Anand, Haidu, Guilbeault, Fraser, Freeland. That was the front row. So if you're trying to signal change, it was like, well, welcome back to 2015. So it was one of those signals for me. And the next observation I will say, and this is more a question mark, there are two Alberta MPs elected in this Commons. One makes it to cabinet, the other doesn't. Is that a tactical error given the challenge right now with Alberta on the national unity front, Rob?
It depends on whether or not Mr. Hodgson can deliver in terms of getting the resource to market. I suspect, given his reputation as a deal maker, a guy who knows business and a guy who knows the energy community, that there will be a great deal of confidence placed in him in terms of mollifying, placating, in some ways assuaging or attenuating the desire for independence or secession that's growing in Alberta. The other name that struck me was Gregor Robertson as Minister of Housing. This was an issue that the Conservatives gained considerable ground on over the last couple of years. They managed to, I think, attract a lot of new voters, younger voters between 30 and 45, people who feel like they've been priced out of the housing market. Mr. Robertson was mayor of Vancouver. Vancouver had a real problem with affordable housing, a real problem with homelessness, a problem with development charges as well, development taxes. He knows the problems. I'm not sure if he's developed solutions. So it'll be interesting to see if he can learn from some of the problems at Vancouver, one of the first cities in the country to deal with some real serious homelessness. If he can learn from that, because solutions weren't applied while he was mayor of Vancouver.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting choice. And when you talk about Gregor Robertson, he was also rumored as a possible environment minister rather than housing. But here he has housing as opposed to, Nate Erskine-Smith, who as a backbencher had a lot to say about housing. So I think that is most definitely a file that I'll be following very closely. In terms of you kind of raised some specific, or rather generalities, but in terms of specific portfolios, anyone that you'll be watching closely, Lori?
Well, yeah, I mean, just to build on what you said about Robertson and housing, I think that's going to be really interesting. Erskine Smith's time as housing minister wasn't enough time for him to do anything. But the minister before that was Sean Fraser.
Yep.
And so that was a key issue for the Liberals that seemed to really contribute to the sense that they were tone deaf. That, and as we said, Pierre Poilievre gained a lot of traction on that issue by being responsive to it. And not at all suggesting that it's all Sean Fraser's fault. I'm just saying that this puts a very different lens on the issue. We know that Carney wants to create a new agency to deal with the federal government's involvement, working with the private sector to work on the federal government's involvement in the supply side of affordable housing. These are big promises that he's made around that key issue. And Robertson will come at it from a Vancouver perspective and also from a big city perspective, whereas Sean Fraser's riding is pretty rural Nova Scotia. And so I think that's one that I'll definitely be interested in to see how that one unfolds.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as they try to marry this idea of modular housing in urban centers that are already built up. I think that'll be interesting. I will point out the fact that we are taking one more look inside Rideau Hall because, as you can see, they're about to take the family portrait, if you will, of the 30th cabinet. You see there the Governor General in front, as well as the Prime Minister. At least you did. There's Sean Fraser, as you were talking about him earlier, Lori. So we'll keep an eye on what's happening at Rideau Hall, but we'll wait for the camera to steady there so none of you get seasick at home. But we'll have that for you here as soon as it happens. And again, we are now counting down, or waiting for rather, the Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre to give his take on the cabinet that was just sworn in. But Catherine and Geneviève, I will say, François-Philippe Champagne chosen as the finance minister. We heard Marcy Surkes talk about the close relationship. There has to be some simpatico between the Prime Minister and that portfolio. But again, Carlos Leitão, he was rumored to be, in good running to be the finance minister overlooked here for François-Philippe Champagne.
Et il peut pas y avoir deux ministres des Finances,
You can't
évidemment.
have two
Tout le monde
ministers
ne
of
peut pas être
finance.
ministre.
Not everybody can be a minister, we know that. But it is something which is very surprising. He wasn't considered for a ministerial role. That's surprising. And Mr. Champagne has become a pillar of this government, a stalwart of the government. I'm sure Geneviève agrees with me. Mélanie Joly and Minister Champagne, both of them, now they have major roles to play, even if Mélanie Joly has changed department. But these are big names. They are. Ms. Joly will be happy with her new portfolio. She wants to garner an economic profile. Mr. Champagne has a major role. Both need each other. Politically speaking, Mr. Champagne has given a lot to Mr. Carney. Mr. Carney is now paying back that debt. Very often, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance have a very tight-knit role or relationship because the Prime Minister needs the advice of the Finance Minister. In this case, it might not be so much the case, but perhaps be in the work in the other direction. Mr. Champagne might be consulting Mr. Carney more, but I think we're going to see a lot of Mr. Carney on economic issues. This is all speculation. We might wonder how Mr. Leitão would have interacted with Mr. Carney. How would he have acted? We'll never know. But what I'm surprised by is that he wasn't appointed Secretary of State. That would have allowed him to learn, because it's a difficult jump to become a minister, especially Minister of Finance right off the bat. Appointing him as a Secretary of State would have been perhaps a good stepping stone for him. However, let's wait for the parliamentary committees. The Parliament will resume. There'll be the chairs of the committees. They'll be elected. Mr. Leitão will probably be the chair of the Finance Committee, as Mr. Sousa currently is or was. We'll see what happens. But it's a bit surprising, nevertheless.
The Liberals do have a deep bench when it comes to finance and the ways you can deploy them. Marcy Surkes saying as much. And I do wonder, Rob, because you were here when Mark Carney was the Bank of Canada governor. And so when you look at his time as the Bank of Canada governor, one, I think it's safe to presume he's going to have a very deep interest in the way finance is actually run in this country. Finance, industry, any of the financial portfolios, he's going to be very much interested in, if not involved in his own way. Do you think, or do you think his time at the Bank of Canada gives us any type of insight as to how he might deploy those departments and those ministries as Prime Minister?
I would suggest that, unlike the last 9 or 10 years, we are going to have a Prime Minister who's going to be deeply involved in the finance and economic portfolios. I note with interest he created a full ministry for artificial intelligence. This is something that Mark Carney is passionate about. He believes, given our access to power, and clean power in particular, that Canada can be an AI superpower. That was an interesting creation in terms of a new ministry. But we were talking about Mr. Letao a little bit. Did he really run to be a backbencher? Did he really do that? I know Claude Gay a little bit. I know some people know him, and he didn't necessarily expect to go in. Even though he's chief executive at IBM Canada, he didn't expect to go into cabinet. I would love to have been a fly on the wall to overhear the discussions between Mr. Carney and Mr. Letao.
And knowing that he's not at the beginning of his career.
68 years old.
Yeah.
Although those of us in our 60s believe this, 60 is a new 40, of course. Did he really do that? Did he go back into politics to be? I'd be surprised. And I think Geneviève is right. I think he'd make an excellent chair of the finance committee. For instance, he might do that, or he may play some other economic role. Clearly, this is a man who did have the ear of the Prime Minister. I expect that he'll be playing some prominent economic role.
Yeah, and more than does he want, do you run to be a backbencher? Where with Mr. Gay, he could. I think there's an argument to be made. I'm learning the ropes of politics. I'm learning the ropes of Parliament. But in Mr. Letao's case, having come from the National Assembly in Quebec, he comes with his own political pedigree and his experience that he could bring to the table. So I think that adds to, and it does make me wonder. Whenever you have not a majority government in this case, but a near majority government in this case, but whenever you have this number of MPs, it is such a difficult balancing act of how you meet aspirations and not create resentments that come in and come out sideways in your government and gets you into trouble down the road. So it is one of the things I wonder about, including the former ministers in the Trudeau era who were competent ministers. So we'll see where that goes. There's also I want to ask about the speed, because that was such a big part of Mr. Carney's election campaign, that change would be coming quickly, that we would be transforming this country at rates that we had never seen before. And it's a bit difficult because on the one hand, we're watching this swearing in ceremony, much like others that we have watched. Is there anything in place here that we see that can create that change, or is that change going to be Prime Minister Carney standing in the background saying, do it faster, get the job done? When you look at the structure of this government, Laurie, does anything indicate that things are going to change as quickly as Mr. Carney promised it would?
I think it's hard to tell based on a list of ministers. I think once we see his approach to the cabinet committee structure, because I don't know at this point whether he's going to use a priorities and planning type thing. The approach where he's got ministers and then ministers of state seems to suggest to me, even though there's a whole bunch of people, that he's going to try to create some structure here where there are key decision makers and then there are people who perhaps meet less frequently and that kind of thing. And so I think once we see that, we'll be able to see where his priorities will start to be given expression. But I do think he's created these expectations around quick implementation. I think one of the key criticisms of the Trudeau government was lack of follow through on implementation, though the ideas were great, right? Or maybe some people think that, some people don't. But I think the pressure on Carney to do something quickly. I don't think he can go to the White House another time and not have a result, even though the first meeting seemed to set a good tone. So I think the expectations on him are going to be pretty high.
Expectations, which brings me to a point which I do want to raise in a moment, but I'm going to ask our control room to put up the image right now of the foyer of the House of Commons, because again, this is where we are going to hear from the Conservative leader. If we there's the foyer. So we are expecting to hear from the Conservative leader. It was scheduled for 1 p.m. Eastern. We're now almost 7 minutes past that mark, so obviously delayed, but we'll bring you there as soon as it happens. And I know the people at this table have busy schedules, so I'm going to continue our discussion, but I'm going to do an advance thank you to Rob Rousseau, Geneviève Tellier, and Laurie Turnbull, because I know once Pierre Poilievre starts speaking, you're probably going to have to take off rather quickly. So we'll bring Pierre Poilievre as soon as that begins. But I want to pick up on a point that you were talking about, Laurie, about expectations. Is there a greater pressure on this? Mr. Carney was able to essentially pull the Liberal Party out from near death to come back and deliver a government, again, near majority government. But on top of that, the threat of Donald Trump, because that was the backbone of his campaign, and the economic challenge, is there extra pressure on this government, unlike past governments? Geneviève?
Oui, pour moi c'est clair.
I think there clearly is the pressure from Canadians. Canadians elected this government. Quebecers who forwent supporting the Bloc to support the Liberals. They did that for a specific reason. They want results. Last week, with his trip to Washington, Mr. Carney faced his first problem. I've had a meeting with Donald Trump about what I do for people who are losing their jobs. We're starting to see economic indicators coming out. Unemployment's up. People are losing their jobs. We're putting a brake on all sorts of decisions. What's the government got for them? So he's going to have to act very quickly. And unfortunately for Mr. Carney, he doesn't have a 4-year mandate. He's probably got about 2 years. Will he be able to do everything he wants to do in 2 years? He's going to have to make strategic decisions to focus on specific sectors and not others. But there's a lot of pressure. He intends to table his budget very quickly. We'll see. But if he tables it in the next 2 weeks, for example, it will show that he means business. But never has the threat been so big for Canada, from our American neighbors. So it's quite natural that there be pressure on our government to perform. People have voted for it, for that threat is real and it's huge. So he has to perform. It's a government that doesn't have any other choice. It has to perform. Laurie?
What do you say about the pressure on this government?
I think that there's a sense that they've gotten this kind of extra mandate, right? It was almost like the Liberals were headed for sure defeat, perhaps disastrous defeat. And there was a certain, I think for some people, like they didn't get to the majority. They nearly did. But it's amazing from Carney's perspective, he was able to do this. But still, there's a sense of the Liberal government is being given a 4th term under a new leader because the circumstances we're in really require the leadership of this particular person. Like there's a sense of qualifier around it, I find. Like this is... And so I think you can hear in Carney's rhetoric as well, the focus on the crisis. We're in a crisis situation. And so he's using that framework to say, here are all the things I'm going to do. Here are the approaches I'm going to take. And I think he will have quite a bit of license because of this crisis narrative. But at the same time, I think it really puts a lot of pressure on him to make progress on some of the things that people are really afraid about, and also things that they feel the Trudeau government didn't manage to get through.
Rob, what do you say about the pressure?
New governments come in and they have plans, and very soon they find out that Canada is a very difficult country to govern, and that things hit them that they never expect, whether they're economic crises or foreign policy crises. The threat to Canada is external and internal. The external threat is, of course, the tariffs from Mr. Trump and his designs on Canada. The internal threat is Alberta. So if you look at what he needs to do right away, he needs to come up with some sort of arrangement with Mr. Trump to either ease the tariffs or push them off for a little while we negotiate a new agreement. He needs to show Alberta. He's not going to build a pipeline while he's in office. Pipeline's a 5 to 10 year project, but he has to begin. He has to show good faith. At least one, probably 2 pipelines have to be approved and construction has to begin. He will help the province of Ontario. There are lots of people who are going to lose their jobs in the automotive industry, welders, other people like that who can be used to help build pipelines. So there's a couple of standards. What's coming at him? He's promised to do something about internal trade by July 1st. Before that, he's got to chair a G7 meeting where Donald Trump is coming to essentially shake the pillars right to their foundations of the world order that's brought us peace and prosperity over the last 80 years. Other than that, he doesn't have much to do, Mr. Carney.
Well, before the end of 2025, but yes.
Si je peux me permettre, qu'il va, pour ce qui est du dossier des pipelines, qui,
On the
selon
pipeline
lui,
file,
il l'a dit à plusieurs reprises,
and he said this several times, this is an essential file. He's going to have to block in his way. That won't be easy. He can't annoy Quebecers or Alberta either, so it's going to have to juggle again and strike a balance. This won't be easy.
But although, I think we'll have to see that. What's interesting here too is the new governments. You talk about they come in with big dreams. Generally speaking, new governments have a honeymoon period, and there tends to be a down period and a down time. Obviously not the case because the election was just 2 weeks ago. We're now swearing in the government. We, as you mentioned, the G7, that's just a few weeks away. Parliament returns the week after next. So it's a packed timeline. So beyond the pressure, is there a grace period? Is there a honeymoon? Or is Mr. Carney up against the wall from day one, Geneviève?
Il va probablement avoir une période de lune de miel.
Well, there will be a honeymoon period. I think there will be one.
Travaille très vite, hein.
But he's working very quickly.
Est-ce que ça va raccourcir la période de
So will the honeymoon period be shorter because he's going to put forward ideas that might be popular, might be unpopular? They haven't had much time to prepare a plan. They developed their platform, which wasn't very comprehensive. The figures are a bit wobbly. He doesn't seem to have a clear vision. Mr. Carney has his vision, but he wasn't able to explain it clearly in his platform document. Very often the platform document is used as a guide for the first months and year of the government. He doesn't have that, so that's going to really be a problem. The danger for this government, I think, is for it to try to do too much, and then people will start to wonder, where is this government going? What's its direction? So the honeymoon period could be shorter this time than it normally would for any other government.
Government will last, right? It's aided by the fact that the Democrats right now have a struggle to figure out how they're going to move forward. The Conservatives have to sort out the not leadership question, but getting Pierre Poilievre back in the House of Commons.
I actually think it's going to be a very strong and stable minority government, to paraphrase Stephen Harper. He's a couple of votes shy. His tormentors, his chief tormentors in Parliament, the Conservative Party has got to do some real soul searching about its future. The New Democrats are doing some real soul searching about its future as well. So honeymoon, no, because as soon as you make a decision, you're going to vex, frustrate, anger a large portion of the population. But in terms of the political danger to him, no one party holds the balance of power. He can make deals. I don't think the Conservatives would ever vote against anything that accelerates pipeline development, for instance. You make deals on each issue with different parties, so he should be fine, barring a major crisis like the one that could be presented by a national unity crisis in Alberta. And even there, Mr. Poilievre is going to have to be very, very careful. He's running in Crowfoot, where there is a great deal of, I think, support for the notion of secession. He's going to have to be very clear, very early, that he disagrees with those in the province of Alberta, that Canada first, Canada last, Canada always wasn't just a slogan during the campaign.
Very quickly for both of you, honeymoon period pressure, whichever you wanted to address.
Peut-être, mais il y a
perhaps.
aussi qu'il ne peut pas se permettre de faire des erreurs.
But he can't afford to make any mistakes, especially in negotiating with the US, because if he gets it wrong, what will happen? The threat is huge, so no mistakes in the negotiation process. In tariffs, he can't drop them, he can't get that wrong either. So it creates a lot of pressure on him right off the bat. And if there's pressure, it's a problem for him. Normally there's a period of grace where there's a honeymoon period. People won't give him the benefit of the doubt very long, not in the current circumstances. I don't know if you agree, Geneviève. I think that Mr. Carney will do things and things will happen to him as well. There are other crises that might occur. The government will have a plan, it'll draft a plan, and something will happen. We just remember the pandemic, and that really threw the government off kilter. We don't know what's going to happen this time, we can't tell. But that could be an issue. It's a minority government. I think it'll be stable at the start. I'm not sure that it'll last very long either. The other parties want to seek their revenge. After 4 terms, the Liberals are due to lose. I think that no matter how long the government lasts,
c'est probablement que ça arrivera pas ce 4 ans-là.
the government really won't last 4 years. I don't think it'll go as far as 4 years. And he might want even to call an early election. If he thinks that he can win a majority, at some point he might call their elections. We don't know Mr. Carney. Now we're going to learn to get to know him. Perhaps he'll have a majority government. Lots of things could happen. People might cross the floor. There might be some new seats. The Liberals might win them. That's already happened at the provincial level, so that's not impossible.
I don't think it's a honeymoon period for him as much as it is people are putting their trust in him. And it's very much based on the competence, the very unique skills and experiences that Carney has, as opposed to some kind of really like sentimental period. Like when we remember when Trudeau came in and it was this kind of sunny ways, people were happy. He went to GAC that day and he was like crowd surfing almost. It was, people were just kind of in love with him. And I don't think that that's the same feeling now, even though you could see happiness today. There's a seriousness to it. And so I don't think it's a honeymoon period as much as it's that people are looking at him and thinking, I hope you're the guy who can get us out of this mess, because we need to start seeing how you're going to do that. And so I think it's a bit more like that.
Il faut voir aussi, vous en avez parlé, combien de temps les autres partis mettront
It
pour se
remains to be seen how long the other parties will take to rebuild. The NDP and even the Conservatives and the Bloc, which lost a lot of seats, they have to lick their wounds. They have to look inward and think about why there are elections coming in Quebec as well. The PQ has criticized the Bloc. Perhaps this relationship has to be reviewed. While the other parties are busy doing that, there'll perhaps be less pressure on the government, but it will come one day and pretty quickly. Sooner or later.
Him some time, but as you point out, Rob, he has a lot of pressures to deal with in the interim, so a lot to be watching for. Now, I'm going to say that we're getting word that Pierre Poilievre is delayed, and we're still waiting for the Prime Minister to appear at Rideau Hall. Now, let's quickly show people at home what we're waiting for, beginning with Rideau Hall, because this is where Prime Minister Carney, along with his new cabinet, will be addressing members of the media. We're expecting that in the next half hour or so. Similarly, if we go to the House of Commons now, the foyer of the House of Commons, that is where we are waiting for Pierre Poilievre to take to the microphone as well to get his reaction to the cabinet just appointed. Pierre Poilievre, of course, no longer opposition leader, having failed to win his seat in the House of Commons, but still the Conservative leader, so we'll have that for you. And of course, we'll have Mark Carney as well as his new cabinet. But for now, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to return you to regular programming. Again, Geneviève, Laurie, Rob, thank you for that. Catherine, you get to stay. We're going to send you back to regular programming. We will be back with both Pierre Poilievre and Prime Minister Mark Carney as soon as they take to the podium. You are watching the Cable Public Affairs channel, CPAC.
Du commerce Canada